Some of the names in that list.
Oh, yeah, okay. On our prayer list here, there's no Gary, no Paulette, no Randy. Okay, I got it right. Very good.
I think so.
Okay, so there's the prayer list. And when we get to you, Michael, your verse will be Malachi 3, verses 2 and 3. Pray for my voice today. It's raspy. So what we're going to look at today, I could title this a couple of possible titles. And I just want to say I appreciate all of you being involved in these studies and providing feedback. This is usually the first look at a topic, and then I take it and edit it and, you know, might change some things. And Michael edits it for me, and then we post it eventually on the website. So this is not very polished, but with your help, it'll get there. So this could be Restorer or Destroyer, or it could be titled just Biblical Rhetoric. And one reason the Bible can be hard to understand is that it uses many different literary devices or figures of speech. And here's a list of them that I got from a website. This says here, understanding biblical literary devices, a key to correctly interpreting scripture. And you can see there's many literary devices used. We've certainly talked about idioms before, and you'll recognize others. There's some I've never even heard of.
What's Zugma?
No, I forgot. There's quite a few.
Never heard of a lot of those.
The list does not include the word rhetoric, but a few of those figures of speech do use rhetoric. And rhetoric is kind of as opposed to prose. It's a different form of language, I guess you could say. So here's a definition of rhetoric. In writing or speech, the undue use of exaggeration or display or bombast.
The undue use?
Yes, like overuse.
Okay.
Here's something else. A rhetorical device is a linguistic tool that employs a particular type of sentence structure, sound, or pattern of meaning in order to evoke a particular reaction from an audience. Anytime you try to inform, persuade, or argue with someone, you're engaging in rhetoric. If you've ever had an emotional reaction to a speech or changed your mind about an issue after hearing a skilled debater's rebuttal, you've experienced the power of rhetoric. Okay, so I'm going to say a bit more about this. To correctly understand the Bible, one must realize that it often employs descriptive language rather than prose. So those are the two kind of classes of language, descriptive or rhetorical, and then prose. Also, the Bible was written in the descriptive language and understanding of people and cultures of its day, okay, thousands of years ago. Understanding the linguistic tools of that time is key to understanding the Bible. And then another place says the Hebrew Bible, whose texts were mostly written in Hebrew, but also in Aramaic, uses a very different rhetoric from Greco-Roman rhetoric. So we need to acknowledge that there is another rhetoric, which we refer to as Hebrew rhetoric. Other Bible texts from the Old and New Testaments, which were translated into or written directly in Greek, broadly follow the same rules. We can therefore rightly talk not just about Hebrew rhetoric, but more widely about biblical rhetoric. Okay, so the New Testament writers, especially, of course, they wrote in Greek, many believe, but they were of a Hebrew culture, so they would have used the same kind of rhetoric that we see in the Old Testament. Rhetoric is the use of language and especially figures of speech to persuade people, to emphasize, to attract attention. The Bible is filled with violent rhetoric to get attention, not meant to be literal. It is especially used in judgment, warning, and hell or hellfire type passages. Okay, you'll see a lot of rhetoric. So what we're going to look at is some of those passages with a goal of determining if the language is talking about literal, judgment, destruction, etc., or if the language is rhetorical, using symbolism, etc., and is actually talking about something like healing, and restoration. Okay, sorry, that was quite a bit, but we're going to look at some passages and basically ask the question, is this literal or is it using rhetorical language for a purpose, to warn, to get attention especially, okay? And we might talk like that sometimes. You might talk to your kids, if you do that, I'm going to tan your hide, I'm going to, do terrible things. And we do it to make a point, to get attention. It doesn't mean we're literally going to do it. So let's go ahead with this first one here. So Axel, if you could read Isaiah 1:24-27, please.
Isaiah 1:24-27. Therefore saith the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will ease me of mine adversaries, and avenge me of mine enemies. And I will turn my hand upon thee, and purely purge away thy dross, and take away all thy tin. And I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion shall be redeemed with judgment, and her converts with righteousness.
Okay, thank you. So I've kind of color-coded some of that. Some of the more vengeful sounding things: avenge me of mine enemies in verse 24, turn my hand upon thee in verse 25. But then, so I've done that in red, and then in blue, I've got words that are kind of talking about, we could say, healing and restoration, okay? Or purification. He says, purely purge away thy dross and take away all thy tin in verse 25. And in 26, I will restore. Verse 27, Zion shall be redeemed. Okay, sounds kind of restorative, doesn't it? So we'll go back in this chapter. The chapter is God addressing his people, okay? So let's read, Isaiah 1:1. Dorothy, please.
The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a sec here to do something. Okay, what is that? And I'm just going to leave that verse at the top so we can see it there. So God is addressing his people. That's obvious in verse 1. What he had to say about them in the following verses is not very good. We're not going to read it all, but here's a sampling. So this is from Isaiah 1:2 up to about 23. I've just picked some things here describing God's people. They have rebelled against me, he said. Israel does not know, my people does not consider. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity. The whole head is sick and the whole heart faint. Verse 15, bring no more vain oblations. Sorry, that was 13. Verse 15, your hands are full of blood. 16, put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes. In 18, your sins are as scarlet. 21, how is the faithful city become an harlot? Verse 23, the princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. So doesn't sound like they're doing very well, does it?
No.
They're not in a very good condition. So he listed all those things. And then verse 24, which I've got at the top of the screen here, starts with the word therefore. What is the significance of saying therefore at that point after this long list here?
There's going to be consequences.
Okay, he's going to do something about it.
He's going to do
sounds like.
something.
Yeah, they've got this terrible condition. Therefore, because of your condition, this is what's going to happen. Okay, I should have filled in a bit more there, but the point is that he's going to do something about it. And what he's going to do from the verses 24 to 27 passage has to do with redeeming and restoration. Can you see that? And we're going to see more
Mhm.
examples of that. He's not going to like destroy them. He's going to take away their dross. He's going to redeem them. He's going to restore them. Okay. So he's using this, in this list here is what we could call rhetorical language. Okay, he goes into this list, he makes them sound really bad. He gets their attention, your hands are full of blood, all these things. And then he he starts going into the restoration that's going to happen. Okay, let's go to Isaiah 35. Isaiah 35, 4-6. Evans, please.
Okay, say to them that are of a fear of heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with the fiancé, even God with the Alcondens. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man live as an heart, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall water break out, and the streams in the desert.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. So
Yeah.
again, he's got this language coming with vengeance and a recompense, sounds like payback. But what actually happens when he comes, according to this passage?
He will come and save you.
Save you.
He will
yeah.
save you, and even details some of the things that will happen here. Blind eyes of the blind are opened, ears of the deaf unstopped. The lame man leap as an hart, or a deer that is. Tongue of the dumb sing. So all these infirmities that people might have will be taken care of, basically. Okay. We will look at the word vengeance more further along, because you might still question how that fits in with that.
Isn't
Okay,
that
let's
in the
read.
glossary, right? Vengeance?
It is in the vengeance is in the glossary, yes. And I
Yep.
think might have a link to that further down to where we get to it again. So what happens is there's suggestions a little different than how we would understand vengeance, okay? And vengeance can be understood differently, as we will see. Okay, let's look at Malachi 4:2.
But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and grow fat like stall-fed calves.
Okay, the Son of Righteousness arise or come, but he comes with healing, okay?
Mhm.
So that kind of goes along with the Isaiah 35 one. And it fits the biblical healing model quite well. Okay, but what about the vengeance? Here it is here, and we'll talk about more, I think, further down too. I'm just going to go to this vengeance page here. Oops, not there. And I'm going to play a 2-minute audio, and this is from Graham Maxwell talking about vengeance. It's very good. So just have a listen. It's about 2 minutes.
Also, we should leave it to God to handle these matters. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Now we're getting clear over to Romans. Leave room for the wrath of God. Do not avenge yourselves. King James says, give place unto wrath. And people have wondered through the years how you give place unto wrath. Does that mean when someone's angry, you back up? That might be prudent. But that's not quite the meaning. It's rather leave room for God's wrath. Vengeance is his. He will repay. And the great benefit of letting God do it is that he loves the ones upon whom he takes vengeance. Moreover, he is always determined, if possible, to save his children. So we turn someone over for the Lord to discipline. You have to realize that you may not like that person, and you turn him over to God's discipline with some relish that the Lord really could give it to him worse than you could anyway. And you're almost anticipating seeing this. I know somebody, I know two people I could name to you, who say they have never avenged themselves. They are counting on the Lord to do it, and to really do it. And he has the power, and so why do it yourself when he could do it much worse? Well, the trouble is when you turn it over to the Lord and he begins to discipline people, these are his children, maybe misbehaving very grossly. But of course, when God disciplines a person, he might turn him around. In fact, to your horror, you might find that as the Lord disciplines your enemy, he wins him. And so you meet your enemy in the kingdom and you say, God, that's not fair. I guess I should have taken vengeance myself. So I turn it over to you, and instead of you taking vengeance on my enemy, you save him. I'm not sure I like that. And I don't think anybody will be in the kingdom who doesn't like that. So it's a lot better to let God take vengeance himself, because he might win the person in the process. Besides, how does God in the end, quotes, take vengeance? As Hosea says, and Romans says, and many other places, he simply, sadly leaves people and gives them up to the consequences of their own rebellious choice. He then leaves them to reap what they've sown. Also, we should...
Okay. I wish I had Graham Maxwell's voice box. It's very nice to listen to.
Well put together.
What's that?
I was just saying it was well put together.
Yes, yes. Also just going to show this page. Okay, this is the definition page or it's a page about sin bringing its own punishment. Okay, and there's quite a few verses listed here. Okay, I'll just read here. Proverbs 8:36, but they that sin against me act wickedly against their own souls, and they that hate me love death. Maybe that's not a real good one. His own iniquities shall take the wicked himself. It's a collection of verses showing that sin will come back and bite you, basically. Okay. Let them be caught in their own traps, by their own devices, let them fall. Yeah, you're familiar with some of those. Okay, so let's go to Malachi, and Michael, if you could read Malachi 3:2 and 3, please.
But who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness.
Okay, so what do fire and soap do? We know that soap is a cleansing agent, and fire is used that way in the Bible as well quite often.
Purifying.
Yeah, purifying. So at first, when you read, who may abide the day of his coming, he is like a refiner's fire. It kind of sounds like that rhetorical language, like you're in big trouble now. But when you look more closely, it's about cleaning us up, right? Like fuller's soap, refiner of and purifier of silver, etc. So his coming to cleanse his people, okay? But this could be confusing. How can we know that this is not a reference to the second coming?
Because at the second coming, he's bringing his rewards with him, and it's already been decided who is going to be saved and taken to heaven by that point,
Okay,
and who is going to be lost. So to refine us, the refining has to happen before that.
okay, good. I didn't even have that. I'll put that verse in there. He brings the rewards at the second coming. And this verse as well helps us to show that. Revelation 22, 11 and 12. Paul, please.
He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to everyone according to his work.
Okay, thank you. So that goes along with the bringing rewards at the second coming. But the point is that before he comes, each person has already matured their characters, maybe we could say, fully developed them, either to the good or to the bad side. Okay, and basically this let him that is unjust be unjust still, etc., is God honoring man's free will. Is saying, you've made your choices, I'm not going to force you to change. So now we'll look at a few verses that talk about fire cleansing, just to kind of establish that better, that fire can be a cleansing agent. So Thomas, please, Zechariah 13:9.
And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God.
Okay, thank you. Michael, when we get to you, your next verse will be Isaiah 33:11.
Right.
So that verse in Zechariah is linking fire with refining. Okay, I think we're fairly familiar with that, but we'll look at a few more. Romans 12:20, Axel, please.
Romans 12:20. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head.
Okay,
Amen.
so are those coals of fire destructive, or is it for punishment? What does that have to do with? It's kind of a funny term. It's obviously not literal, right? This is rhetorical language.
Mhm. Pricking his conscience.
Okay, pricking the conscience for what purpose?
To purify them.
To purify, well, in hopes of prompting repentance, which could then lead to purification. Yeah, it's all part of the process. Okay, and then Luke 12:49. That's Evans, please.
No,
Oh,
it's
no,
Dorothy.
sorry, Dorothy.
I am come to send fire on the earth, and what will I, if it be ready, kindled?
Okay, so Jesus came to light forest fires, or what is this talking about?
Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit? Okay, so different form of fire, right? So this is in a metaphorical sense. It's definitely not literal. When is it ever recorded that during his life on earth, Jesus brought down fire?
No.
Didn't happen.
Mhm.
In fact, when his disciples suggested it, he rebuked them, which kind of tells us something,
Can I read that verse in the New King James?
which Luke 12:49.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I couldn't not quite understand what that meant in the King James. So he wished it was already here. That the Holy Spirit, I guess.
Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
The word there is probably alluding to conviction of sin,
Yes, okay.
possibly.
Yeah, it's part of this process. The coals of fire you do something good to someone and it can prick their conscience, like, oh, I did something bad to him and now he's doing something in turn good to me. So I should feel bad about what I've done. So it's about pricking the conscience and bringing about repentance and that. Yeah. So Evans, if you could read Luke 9:54 to 56, please. Evans, can you read Luke 9:54 to 56? Are we frozen or something?
Evans might be frozen.
It's not there.
He's
I
there.
think he may
but
have,
he's
may
not
have fallen
moving.
asleep. He's moving, but he seems like he fell asleep.
He's looking down at his cell phone and we're just seeing the top of his head there. Can I read that?
Oh, you want me to read that? I don't like that version. Luke 9:54 to
Judy's
56.
going to read it for us.
And when his disciples James and John saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just as Elijah did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, you do not know what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village.
Okay. So this direct rebuke, we could call it, really shows that this is not Yeshua's way of thinking. Okay. And we have to take that and keep that in mind in many places in scripture where it sounds like, well, this verse right here, I'm come to send fire on the earth. This should help us to question that and look for the true meaning of it. So let's take a break at this point. We're back in 10 minutes and continue. Hopefully this is making some sense. It's just kind of to point out the rhetoric is used in the Bible a lot. Many things are not to be taken literally, and we need to understand that they kind of wrote in a, express themselves in a different way.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll be back soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we're looking at some examples of rhetoric in the Bible, and just to help us understand the sort of language they used back then, and that especially that it is not literal. Okay. So now we're going to look at John the Baptist here. So who's reading? Judy, if you could read Matthew 3:10 to 12, please.
And even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. I indeed baptize you with water unto repentance, but he who is coming after me is mightier than I, whose sandals I am not worthy to carry. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his threshing floor and gather his wheat into the barn, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire.
Okay, thank you. So is John talking in plain speech, like prose, or is he using rhetorical language here?
Rhetorical.
Yeah, very much so. Is he trying to get their attention, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's not speaking literally, his using kind of strong language. So this obviously symbolism is not talking about a real axe, right? It's more an axe could be likened to something that cuts out sin, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
When he talks about roots, we can think of the roots of evil, the sinful desires and things. Trees are often used as symbols of people. There's one place where a man was healed, or in the process of healing, he said, I see men as trees walking. Fruits, what is this referring to? Fruits of what? It's not literal apples and pears.
Fruits of the Spirit.
Fruits of the Spirit, okay? And your fruits show your what?
Works.
Well, works are the fruits, but what do they show?
Character.
Your character.
The character, right?
Yeah.
Your character is known by, you're known by your fruits. Talks about being baptized with fire. Well, of course, no one is actually baptized with literal fire. And does water cause repentance?
Baptized with water unto repentance.
Yeah.
No, not literally. Water doesn't.
No.
cause
Spirit
repentance.
does.
Yes, the Spirit does. And chaff, the chaff is kind of the leftover, the junk or whatever from, could be from grains or any number of things. Verse 12 said, whose fan is in his hand, and Judy read that, and hers said, whose winnowing fan. That's a little better, because to winnow with a fan or whatever you're going to use is a means of separating the chaff from the wheat, the bad from the good. And when it says unquenchable fire, a lot of people now have a hard time with that. They think of eternal hellfire or something, but unquenchable does not mean lasting forever. It means it's a fire burning so hot you can't put it out. Okay, but all fire goes out when the fuel is used up.
Where it talks about fire in verse 10, is that that would be the same fire that we read about in Isaiah, right? A purifying fire.
Yes, that's really the point of it, but here he's using rhetorical language.
Right.
It sounds like literal fire, and it's kind of to get attention, but when read properly in the context, it says water unto repentance, thoroughly purge his floor, the winnowing fan to separate chaff from the grain or whatever. It's talking more about purification process.
Yeah.
So if that's referring to a person, you want to cut out the sin, and every tree that doesn't bring forth fruit, it's hewn down and cast into the fire. Could that be the fires of refining?
Yeah, potentially it could be. Yeah.
Rather than God giving up on that person and saying, you're done. Or punishment. Yeah, it's more allowing some of these things to happen so that you'll be refined.
Okay, so the whole passage is full of symbols. So it's important to see that. And chaff is used in the sense of something that burns fast. Okay, it burns very quickly. You think of, I know there's been a few sawmill fires where the sawdust burns, like it practically explodes and causes a fire very quickly. But that word, the original word translated chaff here, is used just twice in the Old Testament. And the other use is in Isaiah 33:11. Michael, please.
33:11. Ye shall conceive chaff, ye shall bring forth stubble, your breath as fire shall devour you.
Thank you. And your next verse, Michael, will be 1 Corinthians 10:10. Okay. But you shall conceive chaff. That's kind of an interesting verse there. How do you conceive chaff?
Who's he referring to?
Who is he referring to?
Yeah, who's he referring to when he says this?
I think that's referring to Satan, isn't it?
No, I think it's referring to Assyria.
Okay.
Assyria, according to my Bible.
Okay. Anyway, the important point is, if chaff is just sort of leftover from processing grain or something, that kind of material, you can't conceive it. This is not literal, okay? The idea is you conceive of things more like sin that are figuratively combustible. Okay. I don't know if that's making sense, but later in that verse in Isaiah 33:11, it says, your breath as fire shall devour you. Well, the breath, this is all symbolic, right? But people will, in the final judgment scene, those that are not repentant will be devoured in a sense, and they'll cease to exist. And well, let's just go to this next verse. I think it'll help with that.
Hey, Ray,
Yes, Paul.
I have a question. Could the chaff and the stubble be like sinful works, sinful deeds?
Yes, I think that's exactly what it is. So these are used in a symbolic sense. You conceive chaff from your heart.
Mm-hmm.
The sins come out, okay? So
Yeah.
it's conceived in the mind first and then acted out in the life. So Paul, if you could read Ezekiel 28:18, please.
You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading. Therefore, I brought fire from your midst. It devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you.
Okay, now this one is definitely talking about Satan, okay? If you read the
Mhm.
context. The multitude of thine iniquities, iniquity of thy traffic, or his lies that he spread about God and his character, actually. I will bring forth a fire from the midst of thee. So God doesn't, light a match inside his body or something. God will, in the final judgment scene, reveal his own character of love. And in contrast to that, the lost will feel tremendous amount of guilt and shame on the inside, right, on their inside. And
Yeah.
the same will happen with Satan. And that's the sense in which God will bring forth a fire from the midst of him.
Mm-hmm.
He will cause him, not that God is even trying to destroy him, God is trying to reveal his love to Satan and everyone else. And the reaction, because of a heart full of iniquity, is to figuratively burn them up.
Mm-hmm. Axel has his hand up.
Okay, Axel, thank you. I can't see you on here. Go ahead, Axel.
Well, I was just comparing and contrasting the two. Back to Isaiah 33, and it says in verse 12, 33:12, and the people shall be as the burnings of lime, as thorns cut up shall they be burned in the fire. But then when we skip down to 14, it says the sinners of Zion, and I stress sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearfulness have surprised the hypocrites. And the question is asked, who among us shall dwell in the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell in everlasting burnings? And the response is, he that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain. So I'm seeing two opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sinful, being burned, being overcome by this fire, and then the righteous are able to walk through that fire with great ease. The fire of God's righteousness, his presence, they're able to stand in that presence.
And it's the same, I believe, the same fire. Okay, it's a
Yes.
revelation of God's love, which is a wonderful thing to those who are in tune with him and understand that he is a God of love. And
Yeah.
to those who have rebelled against him, it's arrows into their conscience, pricking them, sort of thing. They can't accept it and they react quite differently to it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good passage there, verses 14 and 15. And Axel and anyone else, I can't always see everyone in my little thumbnails here. So if you put up your hand using the little icon thing, I may not see it. So you might just speak up instead.
Okay then.
Okay, so we read that. So let's look at how Yeshua himself used prophetic rhetoric. Mark 9:47 to 50. That's Thomas, please.
And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye than having two eyes to be cast into hell, the hell fire, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. For every one shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt have lost his saltiness, wherewith will ye season it? Have salt in yourselves, and have peace one with another.
Mm.
Okay,
What's
so
that scripture, please?
that's Mark 9:47-50.
Thank you. I had 7.
Lots of symbolism in there. What about plucking out the eye? I would hope that's symbolic.
Yeah.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Although it would be a good reminder not to look at stuff you shouldn't.
Well, you couldn't do it then, could you?
Well, you have two eyes.
Yeah, okay. What about immortal worms? It says, where their worm dieth not. Is that literal?
No,
Do we have immortal worms? I don't think so.
no.
Notice that sacrifices are purified with salt. Okay, so there's purification involved in there. And even the worms, this is kind of interesting, and it might sound really odd, but worms can be used to purify. They are
Mhm.
actually used to clean up gangrene in gangrenous wounds. And I'll read this from our website here. Try to keep an open mind about maggot therapy. Sterile, lab-raised maggots are often used to treat gangrene. Because maggots will only eat dead tissue, they can be applied to the affected tissues and allowed to eat away the dead skin. This process can also help your body to heal itself and help to prevent infection.
Yuck.
Yeah, yuck. That's kind of surprising, but they actually, the worms can actually be a cleansing.
Mhm.
Mm,
Okay.
not very appealing, is it? But I guess if it works, it works.
Yeah, well, it does. And it's been used for a long time, apparently.
Apparently.
Okay, now we'll come to what is can be a very scary verse or passage for many Christians. Okay, this is Hebrews 10. And Axel, if you could read Hebrews 10, 26-31, please.
Hebrews 10, 26-31. For if we sin willfully, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries. He that despised Moses' law died without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much sorrow punishment, suppose ye, shall he be thought worthy, who hath trodden under foot the Son of God, and hath counted the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace? For we know him that hath said, Vengeance belongeth unto me, I will recompense, saith the Lord. And again, the Lord shall judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God.
Amen.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds a bit scary, doesn't it?
Rather.
Interpretation.
But take note, this was written to Hebrew Christians, right? This is the book of Hebrews written by Paul. So it was written in Hebrew style. I mean, he was writing to Hebrews. Paul was a Hebrew. And so before this, he had just written 25 verses early in chapter 10 about being cleansed by the blood, having access to God, law in the hearts, etc. And I'm just going to put up a few points from that series of verses. Verse 10 says, we are sanctified. Verse 14, he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Verse 16, I will put my laws into their hearts. Verse 17, their sins and iniquities I will remember no more. So it's stating, some of the benefits of what God has done for them. And then in spite of all those benefits, these Hebrew Christians are in danger of some sort. So Paul admonishes them, and he says, so this is before the verses 26 to 31. He says, let us draw near in full assurance in verse 22. Verse 23, let us hold fast the profession of our faith. Verse 25, not forsaking assembling ourselves together. So then verse 26, he says, if we sin willfully, he's starting to get into the rhetorical thing there. But versus the draw near, hold fast, not forsaking, is telling them to hang on. You're in danger of falling away, but hang on. And then he goes into the rhetorical thing in verses 26 to 31 that Axel read there. And again, I'll just summarize that. He talks about fearful judgment, fiery indignation, dying without mercy, much sorer punishment. Vengeance belongs to me. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. So Paul is basically warning them against sinning willfully, against turning away from everything God has already done for them. They're in danger of this happening. So a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And then in verse 32, so Dorothy, if you could read Hebrews 10:32, please.
But call to remembrance the former days in which, after ye were illuminated, ye endured a great fight of afflictions.
Okay, thank you. So this,
What?
okay, this will make sense in a minute, don't worry. It says, call to remembrance the former days. So it's pointing back to something else, okay? And what it's pointing to actually is something back in the time of Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, it's actually a parallel situation. So what we're reading in Hebrews is, all these wonderful things have been done for the Hebrew people. They were sanctified, put his laws in their hearts and all of that. And yet they're in danger of forsaking. They need to draw fast and hold on because they're in danger of falling away. And this is exactly what was happening back in Deuteronomy. So let's read this, Deuteronomy 32:21. Evans, please.
Okay. The Israel have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will remove them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolishness.
Okay, so saying they have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They were going after other gods, basically. Okay. And God was jealous of that. And we'll see more about the jealousy here too. So Paul's audience was in the same danger Israel was in the former days, back in Deuteronomy. They were in danger of leaving the true God. Okay. I'm just going to go to, this is the web page on a jealous God. Okay, it gives kind of the definition of that. So you can look at that in more detail, but I'm just going to read the definitions according to the two models that we discuss in all these definitions. In the traditional legal model for a jealous God, it says God wants to be worshiped as a supreme being and therefore commands us to worship him only. Worship of anything or anyone else makes him jealous of that competition for worship. And I can maybe add will take action against someone that is doing that. In the biblical healing model, it says when someone is bowing before an idol, God is not jealous of the idol in the sense that he feels the loss of something the idol is receiving instead of him getting it. It's not that kind of jealousy. His jealousy, his concern is for one bowing and looking to another source for what he needs when only God can provide it. Okay, so the godly jealousy is not God's concern for himself, it's his concern for us. Okay, he always puts us before himself. That's what God is like. Okay, so Deuteronomy 32:21 tells us what is happening, what happened back then. And then it kind of goes into this rhetorical language. And Hebrews 10:30, which we read and says, vengeance belongs to me, is actually quoting Deuteronomy 32:35. Okay, comes a little after this verse 21 that we just read. So let's read that verse, or Deuteronomy 32:35.
Vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them.
Okay, the things to come are basically going to be the natural consequences of their sins.
Mhm.
Okay, and we looked at that page a little bit of how sin pays you back. So Paul was quoting Deuteronomy because it was such a similar situation. Okay, and this is kind of like, it's really helpful in the New Testament when you come across things like this. Call to remembrance the former days in Hebrews 10:32. They knew the scriptures very well. They knew their history. Okay. So you can actually identify with a particular situation in the Old Testament. And a good example of that I like is 1 Corinthians 10:10. Michael, please.
Okay. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer.
Okay. So you can actually go back to the Old Testament. Who is this that murmured? Well, you can look at the original word here and find the Hebrew equivalent for it and find the verses where it talked about people murmuring, and you can identify the exact situation that Paul is talking about. He didn't just give kind of a blanket statement, oh, they used to murmur back then. He was referring to a particular situation. Okay, so that helps us to understand that the same thing is happening here. We can make a similar connection between Deuteronomy 32 and what we're looking at in Hebrews. So then we just read Deuteronomy 32:35. To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. So let's go to the next verse, and the few verses after that will kind of help with this. So Deuteronomy 32:36. Paul, please.
For the Lord will judge his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there is no one remaining, bond or free.
Okay.
He has that version.
What's that?
He has the New King James. That's
So-
why he read it from there and not from the
Oh, okay.
King James.
Okay, you read. Okay. I was looking over on the other side here. So in the King James, it says, the Lord shall judge his people and repent himself. Let's just jump down. This is out of turn, but Dorothy, if you could read Genesis 6:6, is at the bottom of the screen there.
And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Oh dear.
Yeah. Okay. Does that mean that God wished he hadn't created the earth or created man on the earth?
Sounds like it.
It does sound like it.
Yeah,
Mine says the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth and he was grieved in
Yeah.
his heart.
Okay, that kind of sounds like God made a mistake. Whoops, I shouldn't have done that.
No, we made the mistake.
We made the mistake. Okay. So it's more like his sorry for the results,
Hmm.
not for what he did, but for how it turned out, which was dependent on us, not him. Okay. So when we read up here in Deuteronomy 32:36, repent himself for his servants.
It's not Deuteronomy 32:36. I'm sorry.
What?
Is it?
Yes,
It is?
it
Mhm.
is.
You have a different version there too.
That's the King
Oh,
James.
no,
one.
that's right. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. Sorry. I'm
Okay,
reading the wrong
good.
verse.
Um, okay, so we read that. I just read that from the King James, but Paul read it. Yeah, you read it from the New King James because that's what you have there, Paul. But so when you go from the King James to the New King James, instead of repent himself, it says have compassion on his servants. Okay, that sounds a little better. Now we're going to go down to the English Standard Version. So we're kind of seeing a progression as we go from one version to another with a change in meaning. So Deuteronomy 32:36, Axel, please. From the screen, the English Standard Version.
Yeah, it says, for the Lord will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there is none remaining bond of me.
Okay, so can you see from that, there's not him judging his people as in, say, punishing them, but vindicating his people. That's quite different. And having compassion on them. When he sees that their power is gone. Okay, this is like, they're not very well. Maybe it's, Axel, how you're feeling this morning, you said. But so the judge here is not judging in a condemning sense. It's more like to diagnose, to determine the needed remedy, maybe. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so we talked about this repenting as in the flood. So God is seeking to heal and restore, not to destroy or annihilate. Okay, we can see that in Deuteronomy 32, which Paul is using to compare to Hebrews. So let's go back to Hebrews 10. So verses 26 to 31 are the verses that use that kind of violent rhetoric there to get attention. And then in verse 32, he switches back more to the prose style to explain verse 31. And then he continues, he talks about not casting away your confidence in verse 35. Verse 36, you have need of patience. Verse 37, he tells them it's a little while till the second coming. Now, Paul may have believed that in his time. In fact, many of the New Testament writers expressed that. We know it was like 2,000 years later, but he was trying to encourage them here. And he says, we are not to draw back, we're to believe to the saving of the soul.
Mhm.
Okay, so he's trying to encourage them to hang on. Okay, to keep the faith, believe, have faith to the saving of the soul. And then we have, that's the end of Hebrews 10. Then we have chapter 11. And chapter 11 of Hebrews is known as what? It's often called the something chapter.
Faith.
Faith.
The faith chapter. Okay, right. Because it has many examples of people who had great faith in spite of their trials and tribulations, right? It's a very good and encouraging chapter to look at. Then right after chapter 11, in chapter 12, it starts off with the word wherefore in the King James, and most versions say therefore. And whenever you see the word therefore, you need to ask yourself what it is there for. What is therefore, right? It's pointing back to something that came before,
Mhm.
right? So the Hebrews were in danger of falling away from God. Paul encourages them after giving them the kind of rhetorical warning. Then he gives all these examples of the heroes of faith. And then he says, therefore, because of that, because these people were all able to hang on by faith, you can do it too. Okay, that's kind of the idea. And then a little bit further in Hebrews 12:5, Evans, if you could read that, please. Is Evans there?
No, Evans is gone.
Looks like Evans is gone. Okay, is that Isaac there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, Isaac, could you
Yes.
maybe read Hebrews 12:5?
Off the screen.
You can read it off the screen there. Okay, I think there's some real audio. There's real audio trouble there, Isaac, so that's okay. I'll read it here. Hebrews 12:5, and ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him.
Yes.
Okay. Despise not the chastening of the Lord. It's going to be good for you, actually. And the result of chastening is given in verse 11. Judy.
Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Okay, exercised thereby in the King James, trained by it. So it's pointing you in a new direction and teaching you how to do something, trained by it. Okay, then let's read Hebrews 10:27. That's Michael, please.
10:27. Okay. But a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries.
Okay, that may not connect very well with Hebrews 12:11. I kind
of contrasts with it.
of, I kind of jumped from one thing to another there. Well, this is part of the rhetorical language there in Hebrews 10. But okay, the reason here is to look at the word. I need a title in there, the heading, is to look at the word consume. And Michael, you're next when we get to it. Your next verse will be Jeremiah 5:3. So in that Hebrews 10:27, many versions translate the word for devour as consume. Okay, some of you may have that. As in Paul, if you can read from the NIV off the screen there, Hebrews 27.
But only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of God.
Okay, so that is a version that does use consume. Okay, so we're going to look more at consume, but just before we get there, let's read 1 Corinthians 15:26. Thomas, please.
The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death.
Okay, so that can just help us, in Hebrews 10:27, the King James says the adversaries, the NIV says the enemies of God. This is interesting. It says the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. This would be an enemy of God.
Yeah.
And which is actually very interesting because some people believe that God causes death. Would he use his enemy to do his work? That doesn't seem to make sense. So now looking more at consume, Hebrews 12:29. Axel, please, back to you. You're muted, actually.
Yeah. Hebrews 12:29. Okay. 12:29. For our God is a consuming fire.
Okay. So where it talks about in Hebrews, fire that will consume the enemies of God. Here it's saying our God is a consuming fire. So you can almost reason that the fire that consumes is actually him. Okay. And this Hebrews 12:29 is actually quoting Deuteronomy 4:24. Dorothy, if you could read that, please.
For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God.
Okay, so we can see that Hebrews 12:29 is quoting that from Deuteronomy 4. And the word even is supplied there. So we could just say God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Okay, so they kind of equates the two. And we've already looked at jealous and what that means. And it's really more of God's concern for us, for his people, than for himself. So the context of this, Deuteronomy 4:24, is given a little bit in verse 23. Evans, is Evans?
I don't think so.
I think Evans is gone. Okay, I will read that. Deuteronomy 4:23 says, "Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make you a graven image or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God hath forbidden thee." So it's talking especially here about idolatry, graven image. And okay, and if you look more at the context of all this passage, he actually predicts that they will leave him. Okay.
Excuse me.
So a consuming fire, as we mentioned up here, is basically equivalent to to a jealous God. Is basically saying, I will not let you go. Okay. And the result of them trying to leave him for other gods and his response in not wanting to let them go is given in verse 31, Deuteronomy 4:31.
For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them.
Okay, so they're in danger of leaving him for other gods, of forgetting the covenant. And he says, he will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee.
Nor forget the covenant.
Right.
They're the ones that leave him.
They're the ones that are forgetting the covenant. Right. He's always trying to bring them back to. Okay, let's go to Michael, Jeremiah 5:3.
Jeremiah 5:3. O Lord, are not thine eyes upon the truth? Thou hast stricken them, but they have not grieved. Thou hast consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return.
Okay. So we can figure something out just from that one verse. It says, thou hast consumed them. And then it goes on, this is their reaction to this consumption. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return. And if you go on further in Jeremiah 5, they're still alive. This consumed them is not destroying them, as we might think.
Yeah.
Again, this, thou hast consumed them. I should have put that in red. This would be the rhetorical language. Thou hast stricken them. Okay.
Yeah, if they consume them, to me, they're gone. They're
Yeah.
burnt up. But then they continue to refuse to receive correction.
Yeah, and you'll see more if you
Yeah.
read on in Jeremiah 5. So the consumed, that process is not destroying them, is talking about the correction. Okay. And I've just got a part of a verse here. I don't know if that's the next verse. It says, therefore I said, surely these are poor, they're foolish, for they know not the way of, somehow I missed something there. Is that in Jeremiah 5?
Jeremiah 5:4.
Oh, okay. You want to read the whole verse if you have it there?
That's Paul's verse.
Oh, okay. Paul, if you could read it.
Sure. Therefore I said, surely these are poor, they are foolish, for they do not know the way of the Lord, the judgment of their God.
Nor the judgment of their God.
Oops. Sorry, just give me a sec. I'm just putting that verse in there. There it is. Okay. They know not the way of the Lord, in other words, the way God does things, nor the judgment of their God. And many people today don't know the judgment of God. And actually that word judgment, of course, judging can be used in different ways. And we usually think of it as judgment as in condemnation, but it's also judgment as in discerning the qualities, the status, the needs of people. Yeah, we judge all the time, and some of it is perfectly fine. We go to the supermarket and we're going to pick out some fruit, and we judge, well, this one is better than this one that looks moldy, so we take the good one. That's a judgment. I see Paul has his hand up there. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, couldn't you also read that last, the justice of their God?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, in fact, the original word might be one that's more commonly translated as justice. I'd have to look.
Verdict.
Okay, so just in summary, can you see, hopefully this made sense. I should have worked on it a bit more maybe. Can you see the effect of understanding how the Bible uses rhetoric?
Yeah.
If you don't understand it as rhetoric, you're going to see it as, vindictive, punishing language. And it's usually more about correction. So is God a destroyer or a restorer?
Restorer.
He is a restorer.
Restore.
He's a restorer, yes. And restoration, of course, fits better with the biblical healing model of the gospel, right? Rather than the traditional legal one where every sin must be punished, that kind of idea.
Mhm.
We have a God who dearly loves us. He always forgives us, and he wants to heal and save. And ultimately, he wants us to dwell with him forever. Okay, that's what he's trying to achieve. And it's really good for us in our spiritual walk to understand and believe that. And there's lots of evidence there in the scripture. We just need to understand the words better. And that's the purpose, of course, of the character of God and the gospel glossary on the website. Let me just show that to you for a sec. Okay, there's the page of the glossary. There's all the words showing in blue links, all the words for which there's definitions. Okay, so I just put this little bit at the end about judging that we just talked about. When it says we will be judged as we judge, remember that from the Gospels, that can be taken in different ways, but most importantly, it is about how we judge God, how we understand his character. If we judge him to be vengeful and unforgiving, we will not be able to see him as forgiving, and we will not be capable of receiving forgiveness. And then at the end, I put just like Cain. Okay, after Cain killed Abel, he was banished, and I'm sure God offered him forgiveness, but he said, if you look in the margin of the King James Version, he says, my sin is greater than that it can be forgiven. I think that's it. He did not believe that God could forgive him. He already had a very wrong concept of God's character, even at that early stage in Earth's history. But we at the other end of Earth's history have a lot more information. Hopefully we're understanding these words correctly, and we can come to a better understanding of God's true character. And that will really help us here, I think. Okay, any thoughts, comments, questions, or anything? I hope
No.
that made sense.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yes, we did. Yeah, for sure.
So when you see that kind of violent language in there, recognize that a rhetorical process may be happening. God is using strong language to get our attention. And the people, we tend to take things very literally in our culture. But back then they used a lot more rhetoric, a lot more poetic type language, and it made more sense to them, and it can to us if we will, make an effort to understand it. So,
You know, what's interesting is back in, thousand years ago or whatever, they had schools in Rome where these priests and lawyers would go to be trained in rhetoric.
okay,
And it was an important tool for them to be able to control the masses.
really, okay,
There's also something called casuistry and sophistry, which are other methods that they use in. They even religion has like its own language. When I first was studying it, there was so many words that I had never heard of or understand, and so I had to go through all these different words that they use in religion to try to figure out what the heck they were talking about.
yes. Okay, I just put up on the screen again this quote that I read at the start about how rhetoric was used in the Greco-Roman world, and
Mhm.
Hebrew rhetoric really came into the New Testament as well, because
Oh,
of course
yeah.
it's the same people. So
Yeah, it could be used in good ways and in
Yeah.
bad.
well, it can be good as long as we understand it. If we misunderstand it, it's going to give us a wrong picture of what God.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll just have a closing prayer here and we'll say goodbye. I'll just okay.
Stop the recording.
I
though.
stopped the